So up until this point, last week, we kind of went in here and we sized our main feeder breakers and our wires. Not going to draw all of them, but just a few of them so you kind of get the idea here. So like for example, this might be for, you know, MCC1, this one's MCC2, and then of course we had one for our office, right? And so forth. So we kind of had all of this that we did last week. And of course these are going out, they're feeding their MCCs, which are feeding our machines, our receptacles in the shops, our lights. Then we have one going out to our office to feed that transformer and all the load in there. But didn't know all of these breakers that we sized last week, these are all inside of our main distribution panel, all those main feeder breakers that we sized. So we know that this is going out and it's feeding everything in our shop, but what is feeding this main distribution panel? That's what we're going to focus on today, and that's going to be our substation. So our substation is going to be made up of a transformer. We will have a secondary breaker on this one. We'll also have a primary breaker. And then we have our source, which is the utility in this case. Listen.
Thank you.
So this is kind of a simplistic one line of how everything is being fed in our shop, or our facility, I should rather say, shop and office. So our goal today is to size this transformer and these two breakers. So to do that, well, first, before we get off into all the specifics, but on our secondary side here of our transformer, what is our voltage? We should know that.
277. Right?
That's phase to ground, multiply that by square root of 3.
4.
There you go. So on this secondary side, because this is what our main distribution panel, all of our feeders, on this secondary side, we have that 480 volts. And technically that 277 there. So that's kind of our known information at this point. So before we can size any of the breakers, we have to figure out what size our transformer needs to be. So we're going to first size the transformer, then we can size those breakers. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the sum of all of our main feeders' largest phase angles. So last week when we were talking about our feeder wires, and I had those A, B, and C phase columns here, and then we kind of totaled all of those up, kind of right in here. Those are the numbers we're looking at. So you're going to take the largest phase whatever it was, whether it was A, B, or C, off of each feeder prior to that 130% growth factor. So that means before. So we added the growth factor kind of over here, but we're taking these numbers here. We want it before the growth factor there. And so I put in parentheses that dealt with wire sizing, not the short circuit protection sizing, right? So we only added that growth factor on our wire sizing. We don't add a growth factor on a breaker. So, to kind of give an example of that, I'm just going to make up some numbers. Alright, so I just threw some numbers up there, kind of at random. But these need to be those largest phase amps from each main feeder prior to their 130% growth factor. You're not adding up A, B, and C phase, no, you're taking whatever phase has the largest current from each main feeder. So this main feeder 1, that 500 amps I have written here, that might be from A phase. Main feeder 2 here, that might be C phase. But you're taking the largest phase from each feeder.
And then office is the transformer for the office, right?
Yes, the office transformer, yep. So that will just be, since that's technically gonna be the same across on all three phases, that's just whatever you calculated for that load, the transformer rated current. Yep.
Bus.
So, I'm gonna add these up. And for me, that comes out to 2,500 amps, or just 2.5 kiloamps. So you're gonna do that same process, but just with your numbers. Again, I'm just making up stuff here as an example. So once we kind of get all of this current added up, that's everything that's going to be flowing on this secondary side here. We also know voltage, so then now we can incorporate that three-phase equation. So we got power in three-phase, it's equal to square root of 3 times V line times I line times our cosine of theta. But we said for our project, our power factor is what? Unity, right? So that's a numerical value of what? 1. So with our power factor being 1, we can kind of just drop off that cosine of theta, right? And so now we can mathematically prove that our power, our watts, is equivalent to our voltamps, because that's what we're doing here. So we're putting volts and amps together. So typically, yes, we would have power here, and that is what we're going to solve for. But we're going to kind of translate that to voltamps here at the end. So we're going to fill in our equation, because we are trying to solve for how much power is going to be here. So we'll have square root of 3 times voltage in our line. That's our 480 volt value. And we totaled up all of our amperages here, And since this is this 48277, is that a Y or delta?
So why?
So what stays the same in a Y?
The phase, voltage and the line voltage. And the current.
So I line is equal to what?
Phase.
I phase, right? So even though we added up all of our phase currents here, phase is equal to line, right? So we can substitute that in here. So we're gonna take this 2.5 kiloamps for my example, we're gonna substitute it in. And that's gonna give me some number. Let's see here, and I get 2.0, we'll call that 8 megawatts. So that's how much power I'm gonna have on that secondary side there. But transformers are listed in what units? I would technically go with kVA. That's probably a little bit more accurate term other than just volt amps. Most of your transformers are listed in kVA. However, when you do get to a substation setting, they typically are listed in MVA because they're just so large at that point. And there's not necessarily a set size for substation transformers. Those are almost kind of custom made for each scenario. But what we're gonna do is, because, again, kind of going up here to our conversation, we know with this unity power factor, watts and voltamps are the same, so we don't have to manipulate this value at all. But the only thing that we are going to do is we're going to round up to the next 100 kVA. I'll even make a little note of that up here. So the next 100 kVA, that is that 0 right there, what I calculated. So what I mean by regardless that we're gonna round up, so regardless of whatever this second decimal place is, in my case, that 8, regardless of whatever that number is, we're always going to round up this first decimal place here. So in this case, it kind of worked out because 8 is something normally we would round up on. But even if it was like a 2 or a 3 or something like that, we're still gonna round up. So in this case, what would that round up to? 2.1, there you go. So like I said, there's not a set list of substation transformer sizes. It's all based on what we calculate right here. We're gonna round up to that next 100 kVA, and that's gonna be our transformer size. That's what we're gonna kind of custom order, so to speak. So in our notebooks, if you go, I don't know, probably a little over halfway through the book, you'll see the cover page that says substation transformer sizing. And then the page directly after that, is of course titled that, but it's blank. So on that blank page, you need to show all of this work right here. You need to show listing out all your main feeders, adding them up to get a total amperage, showing your three-phase equation, plugging your values in, what you calculated, and then what you're rounding up to pick your transformer size. So everything that we just went through right there needs to be displayed on this page here. So is everybody good with the transformer size? Pretty easy. Okay, so now that we have this transformer size, right? Now we know what this size is. Now we can go and size what the secondary and primary breaker is going to be. So we'll start on the secondary side. So we're still going to use these three-phase equations. So we're still going to have power three-phase is equal to square root of 3 times V line times I line. And of course that cosine of theta, which we're going to end up just kind of dropping off anyways. Now, the reason we're using this formula is because we now have to solve for currents. So we can't just use this 2.5 kiloamps that we added up here earlier, because that 2.5 kiloamps, that would be a transformer rated current for a 2.08 MVA transformer. In our case, or in this example, we have a 2.1. So before we even do any of the math, with this being slightly higher, I should have slightly higher amperage, right? Just ever so slightly. So, kind of going back to our conversation of this power factor being at unity, this is watts and voltamps. We know that they're the same thing. So even though this power here is dedicated for watts, I'm actually going to plug in my transformer size here. So in this case, I'm going to plug in 2.1 MVA, because voltamps and watts are the same thing, is equal to square root of 3 times our voltage on the secondary is still at 480 volts. But now I'm solving for current. So, solving for current, we're going to take both sides, divide it by square root of 3 times 480 volts. Don't forget parentheses when you do that. And when I calculate that, I get 2,525.9 amps. So it is slightly higher than what we summed up, which makes sense. So that is our transformer rated current. So this is where our code books come in, and we're going to have to go back to Article 450 today. So we looked at that last week, but that's on page 373. Page 373, looking for Article 450. So we looked at this last week for that office transformer feeder. So we're still going to look at 450.3 because we do need overcurrent protection. But now if we look at our options, last week we looked at option B, as in Bravo, and that says transformers 1,000 volts nominal or less. Well, we know what the secondary voltage is, but I haven't told you what's on the primary side yet. So, on our primary side here, this utility, what that means is the utility is going to give us a straight drop off of their lines. So, that's why we're having to supply the transformer. So the utility voltage over here for everybody is going to be 13.8 kilovolts. That's going to be the same for everybody. So when we look at that option B, 1,000 volts nominal or less, is that applicable to our substation transformer? No, right? Because we have over 1,000 volts on that primary side. Again, that nominal value there, it doesn't care if it's on primary or secondary, it's talking about both. because you can have step up and step down transformers. So it doesn't care what side it's on. So that option B that we used last week for our office feeder, or our office transformer, is not applicable to us. So we need to kind of look at our other options. So looking there, option A, it says transformers over 1,000 volts nominal. Does that fit our description of the substation transformer?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So this week, we're gonna look at option A there. So that's gonna direct us to table 450.3a, which is really nice, because that's just right there below it. It's a little bit larger table than last week. But in the title of the table, at the end, in parentheses, it's still important. It says, as a percentage of transformer rated current. That's why we solved for this little over 2,500 amps here. That's our transformer rated current. So looking at our table, our first column says location limitations. There's two options there. I'm going to kind of make some notes over here off to the side. For our project, we are going to fall into the supervised location. So if you notice there's that little subnote 3 next to that. If we go down to the bottom and I read that, it says a supervised location is a location where conditions of maintenance and supervision ensure that only qualified personnel monitor and service the transformer installation. So since our facility is a 24/7, 365 operation, we're going to say that all of our maintenance guys are qualified techs to work in there. So we fall underneath that supervised location. So now we're just looking at that bottom half of the table there. Our next column, transformer rated impedance. We got 3 options there. We're going to fall in the not more than 6%. Not more than 6% impedance. So we were looking at that bottom half of the table. We still are, but now we're just looking at that one row of not more than 6%. Our next column is our primary protection over 1,000 volts. So we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there, but we can go ahead and look up this information. And it breaks down into 2 sub-columns, depending if you got a circuit breaker or a fuse. So I'm just letting y'all know that we do have circuit breakers on both the primary and the secondary side. So looking there at the circuit breaker column, what percentage do y'all see?
600.
600. So not quite to the primary just yet, but we'll go ahead and record 600% for it. All right, our next set of columns is for our secondary protection. Well, the first sub-columns that it breaks down into is over 1,000 volts or less than 1,000 volts. So again, we have 480 on our side, so we are 1,000 volts or less. And if we look there, at that point, it does not matter if you have a circuit breaker or fuse because they're all listed in that same column there. But looking at that very last column, what percentage do y'all see for the secondary? 250. So that's just kind of our notes over this transformer protection here. So, kind of coming back over here to our secondary side, looking at this table, it told us that we need to take 250% of our transformer rated current. So I'm going to take this 2,525.9 amps and multiply that by 250%. calculate 6,314.8 amps. So, if you're wondering or noticed that after that calculation, I went ahead and wrote AT and boxed my answer and wrote it up there on the front. So, we're not going to look at table 240.6 this week. Reason being is because these breakers that we're calculating are not fixed trip breakers. So what that means is, it's like if a breaker goes out in your panel at the house and you go over to Home Depot, you can go buy a 20 amp breaker, for example, right? Well, that 20 amp breaker, that's all it'll ever be, a 20 amp breaker. You can't go in there, you can't modify how much amperage it can handle. I mean, you could, but legally, in terms of the code and what the manufacturer produced, you cannot do that with that kind of breaker. So, we're not using fixed trip stuff here. What we're using is adjustable breakers. So, y'all being in testing and maintenance, y'all have been dealing with those breakers that have the trip units, those little black boxes on there, where you got all those settings that you can tweak and fine tune. So we can buy a big breaker and then tune it to what we want. So, when we box this answer, this necessarily isn't the true breaker size. This is probably more accurate to say that this is our calibration of what we're going to set our breaker to. So this is our settings that we're going to input into our breaker to trip at this current.
So our primary is 600 and our secondary 250. That's going to be across the board, right? For everybody's
Yep.
project?
Yep, that's for everybody. Yep, because we're all going to have that same voltage on the primary side there. So that's kind of really where all this stems from, is the voltage, and of course like those other two categories. So, yep, voltage and what devices. So yep, that'll be across the board. Everybody's good with the secondary? All right, so that was our secondary breaker. We're basically going to do the exact same thing here on the primary. So we're still going to utilize that three-phase equation. So square root of 3 times b line times I line times that cosine of theta. Again, we can kind of drop off that cosine of theta. Our transformer size is not changing, so we still have 2.1 MVA. Square root of 3. But now our voltage, line voltage, and that's what this is, line voltage, is increasing to 13.8 kilovolts, and we're still solving for line current. So before I even solve for that, should my current be really high or should it be really low?
Really?
Shouldn't be. So I kind of draw my little bar graph here. So if we're drawing a bar graph, and this bar graph is watts, right? Using Watt's law. Because this three-phase equation here, this is basically just three-phase Watt's law. Well, on our secondary side here, we have 480 volts. So that might be that little shaded portion there. So our watts, in this case, is that 2.1, what we're calling MVA, because watts and voltamps are the same. So that's our transformer size. Well, in order to calculate that value as far as our math goes, the volts and the amps need to kind of come together to make that value. So we have such little volts that current is having to pick up the slack there. Well, when we come over here to the primary side, that 2.1 is not changing, but we're increasing our voltage. So if we super increase our voltage from 480 to now almost 14,000 volts, well, to maintain this 2.1 MVA, current has to shrink way down, right?
This might be a dumb question, where do you get the 14,000 volts from?
That's just a number that we just made up for our project. That's the primary voltage on that utility side there. So, like I said, that's just gonna be the same for everybody. So before we even do this calculation, we should end up with a really high or really low number. Y'all tell me.
Low.
Really low number, right? So there's kind of some little pre-checks you can start running in your mind. So if we calculate something really high on this side, we maybe punch something in our calculator wrong. But it's going to be the same process. We're going to take both sides and we're going to divide them by square root of 3 times 13.8 kilovolts. Again, don't forget parentheses. These will cancel out on that side. And I get 87 point, we'll just call that 86 amps. So a lot lower. So again, we're still gonna apply table 450.3a. And again, kind of looking at the little notes that we jotted down there over there off to the side, it told us for the primary side that that's going to be 600%. So I'm going to take this 87.86 amps and multiply that by that 600%. And I get 527 point, we'll call that 15 amps. So same thing applies to that primary side. That's not going to be a fixed trip breaker. That's an adjustable breaker. So again, probably more accurate to say that that is our calibration setting for our breaker rather than the breaker size. But that's what we're going to calibrate that adjustable breaker to, is about 527 amps there. So once you get that calculated value, whatever that number is, those are those settings. So that's what we're going to record. So coming back over here to your notebook, here was the transformer sizing page. The page directly after that is our substation protection cover page. And then the tab after that, same thing, it's a blank page to show your work. So you need to show what we just did right here. You need to show one for your primary side, one for your secondary side. You'll show the same process. Show your three-phase equation, plug in your values, solve for I-line, show your table percentage, show the math of doing that and what you calculate and what your breaker calculate or calibration settings are. But all of that will need to go on this page here. So has anybody got any questions over transformer sizing or the breaker sizing?
Does it have to be on one page? Can you separate them on two different pages?
For what?
For your primary and then your secondary?
You can put them on both on the same page. Yeah. I mean, if you really wanted to have one page for one and another for another, you certainly could. Just make sure it's labeled as such. But reality, they're not gonna take up that much room, so you can put both of them on there. Should have enough room on there. So. What other questions y'all got?
You have drawings regarding.
Not yet, no. No, we'll cover all the drawings next week. So this week, it's just those three calculations right there. The transformer, we have both the primary and the secondary breaker.
So that not more than 6% impedance, that doesn't go into the calculations at all?
I mean, it does, because it'll factor in what percentage we look at. Our transformer impedance 5%, so we kind of fall underneath that not more than 6%. But as far as the actual impedance value, no, it's not.
Yeah, but kind of about next week, I was having a hard time setting up the panel schedule for last week, sorry. I was having a hard time setting up the panel schedules for like all the feeder wires and all that. Generally, we don't do that like after class.
What week are we on for like the thing?
What are we?
Week 10,
right?
Yeah, this is week 10 material. Yeah. But this is week 11 of the semester. So, everybody's good with that up here, those three sizes, everybody's good with how to figure those out? Okay. Just real quick, pull up the schedule here. Okay, so, I think I mentioned it last week, but this week 10 material, our substation stuff. This is the last of the calculations in your notebook. So, you now have all the information available to you to completely fill out that Excel book, right, your design notebook. So, there should be no other blank pages in your notebook after this week, because we're not talking about calculations anymore. This was the last of the calculations, okay? So, we're at the very tip of the pyramid, going back to that analogy, all right? So, if you want, you can go ahead and you can start going through your notebook. Well, kind of once you get this done, you can start going through your notebook and making sure that you have everything. Dotting your I's, crossing your T's kind of deal. And a good self-check for that is if you come up here to the front of your book, this table of contents, this is all the material that you should have in your notebook, okay? Now, I get this question a lot. But no, there is not a certain number of pages that you should have in your notebook. That varies for everybody, right? So, but again, this is a good cross-reference, because you should be able to go in there and say, all right, I need to have a machine and motor schedule. You know, now keep in mind, some of these pages might have multiples of those pages, right? Like for example, those lighting calculations we did. Every room has a page, right? So you can kind of pull up your drawing in the office, and you can kind of cross-reference and say, okay, yes, every room that I have has a lighting calculation page. So, like I said, once you get your notebook done, you can go ahead and start making sure everything's in there, it looks good, formatted well, all of that good stuff. Now, next week, that week 11 material, that'll be a little bit longer of a talk because we're going over our one-line drawing. But I'm going to go ahead and go over how to turn in your project and the due date and everything like that. So, like I told y'all in the first week, and what's stated in the syllabus, our project is due on the last Tuesday of the semester. So this semester ends on August 21st. That's a Friday. So that last Tuesday is August 18th. So Tuesday, August 18th, that is the last day you have to work on your project and submit it. So I even wrote below there, by no later than 5 p.m. So again, that is a strict deadline on that date and time.
It's gotta be a dumb question. Are we giving you your hard drives or?
I'm gonna cover that.
Okay.
So, that's the deadline. So how to turn in your project, because there's nothing for you to submit or anything in Canvas. So what you're going to do is, you're gonna send me an email. My email is listed all over in Canvas, it's listed in the syllabi. Most of y'all have already emailed me at some point or another anyways, but you're gonna send me an email, and you're gonna attach the 4 files we've been working on all semester. That pertains to your design notebook, so the Excel book, your office drawing, your shop drawing, and the one-line drawing. Those are the 4 files we've been working on all semester. So you're gonna take those 4 files, you're gonna put them in the email. You don't even have to make a zip folder or none of that. Just take those 4 files, put them right into the email, and you're gonna send them to me. So, on the email portion, if you're using your student email, you should be okay because it should have your name in there. But if you're using like your personal email, like for example, like Call of Duty Zombie Slayer 42 or whatever, I don't know who that is. So you can use that email, I don't care, but if you're using an email like that, make sure you say, hey, this is John Doe, or whatever, right? I need to know whose project that is. So if you're gonna use that email, that's fine, but at least put your name on it so I know whose project it is. But here's the important part. When you email me, give me a little bit of grace, but I will email you back, okay? So you're not just gonna shoot me an email and kind of cross your fingers and hope kind of thing. So when you email me, I say give me a little bit of grace because I got some other classes and stuff, but I'd say give me a day, 2 days, but if you don't hear anything back from me after a couple of days, you probably need to come find me because I didn't get your email. So like I said, when you email me, I will respond back to you and say, hey, I got your project. Okay, so that way you know that I got your project and you're not just hoping that I got it. So if you send me your project and I never email you back, I don't have your project. So when the deadline comes and I start grading and I punch in grades into the grade book and you get a 0, and you come and you go, well, I sent you my project, and I go, well, I never got it. Tough luck, okay? It is your responsibility to ensure your project gets to me, okay? I'm just doing you the common courtesy of letting you know that I have received it, so you're not sitting there wondering, okay? So, like I said, take some initiative there, but give me like I said, about a day's grace, day or 2. If you don't hear anything back from me, then you can come find me, kind of thing. So, also with the email thing, make sure that it is an email that you check frequently. So if I start degrading, which I typically don't do until that following Wednesday, but make sure that it's an email that you check frequently, because never had this issue, but just in case, if I can't open up a file or something like that, I need to reach out to you. I'm gonna reach out to you via email. And I'm gonna say, hey, I had problems with this file or whatever, can you resend it or whatever the issue is, okay? So make sure you are checking that email. Also, with this deadline of 5 p.m., if you don't know or are unaware, emails are timestamped. So if it says anything after this 5 o'clock, it's late. So I will grade it, but I will grade it super quick, meaning that will be a 0, okay? So do not wait until 4:45 p.m. on that Tuesday to crack open your laptop and be like, all right, I'm gonna send him an email, turn in my project, and next thing you know, somebody drives down the street and knocks out the internet, okay? So don't take those kind of chances, all right? Make sure you give yourself enough, ample amount of time to submit your project before this deadline, all right? So y'all have plenty of time in the semester. If you've been staying on track of it, you definitely have a lot of time to kind of go over everything, make sure that everything's turned in, okay?
So for the Excel document, I know you said it really doesn't matter, but do you prefer like a PDF or
Nope. So for those 4 files, you're turning them into their raw format. So the Excel stuff, it's like a .xlx or something file, okay? So turn that in. The AutoCAD stuff should be a .dwg. It should all be in that raw format, no PDFs, no nothing. If you use Google Sheets, again, that's fine, but you need to take that Google Sheets and you need to download it to a Excel. So if you use Google Sheets, like I told you all in the beginning of the semester, you're probably gonna have to set some time aside to go reformat some stuff, because Excel and Google Sheets don't always play nice. So,
Do we have to at all attach an image or like a scan of the project paper you handed to us?
nope, I have all that on file.
Okay.
Yep.
So our grade would be by Friday?
Probably, just because this is a larger bunch for this summer semester, so I'll probably have them in by Friday. Maybe by the end of Thursday, but probably on Friday, if I had to guess. Yeah, because contrary to popular belief or whatever, like I said, I don't start grading until the following Wednesday. So even if you turn in your project early, I'm not gonna start looking at it until the following Wednesday. Okay? Oh, something I forgot to tell my other group yesterday, so y'all can spread the word, but also with the submissions, you got one submission. Okay? So, you got plenty enough time to make sure your project looks pretty and all that good stuff. But when you turn it in, that's it. Okay? I've had problems in the past where if somebody turned it in like a week or two early, they'd come back and say, hey, actually I forgot to do this, that, and the other. And I'm like, all right, well, resubmit it. And then they would keep doing that and doing it and doing it. And next thing you know, I got like 16 copies of their project because they kept finding little stuff. No, do all that on your own time. I don't care. Take as much time as you need up until that deadline. But when you submit your project, that's when you submit it, you walk away. Okay? Because at that point, I'm not going to try to keep up with, like I said, 16 versions of your project and know which one is great and not great.
So I know you said at the beginning that there'd be an option to print it out, and if you do wanna print it out, you usually put that in the email, or?
Yeah, you can let me know in that email and I'll print them out at that time. If you turn your project in earlier, I would prefer that, and of course say that in the email, so that way I can print them out, hopefully when you're still here on campus. And you got another lab or something, you can come pick them up. I would prefer it that way, but if you waited till the deadline and told me to print them out, then I can do that. But thing is, though, if you tell me to print it out, you better come pick it up. If you don't, I'm gonna come find you, all right? So, if you tell me you want it printed out, come pick it up, okay? So, but yeah, you can print them out if you want. Okay. Is there any questions regarding the deadline or how to submit your projects? Any of that process? No? Okay. All right, well, like I said, next week's gonna be a little bit longer of a conversation. So I just wanted to go over that today, so that way y'all knew while we had the time. But next week, that is our last lecture. That's it, next week. That's just the one-line drawing. So again, that's where we're gonna learn how to do those two drawings back there. It looks complicated, it's really not. I've given y'all